So I came across the creek here. I try to get a different angle from the photo that I took last time. And I definitely like what it's looking like here, but it's going to be a pretty difficult shot. And again, I have a pretty bright sky behind the dark trees, so I really was hoping for some fog to kind of help this out. Conditions aren't really cooperating that well, but I think I might just try to grab this as a test shot and see if it'll work for when conditions are better. So it's actually a couple days later, and I'm running back down to the tree right now in hopes of getting some foggy conditions. So looks like it might be a little clear here, right here by the tree right now, but there's fog around, so we'll see how we do. Well, got all the way down to the tree and realized I left my tripod at the house. So now I got to run all the way back and get it. Ugh. Not quite as foggy as I was hoping it was going to be. So we'll just see what we can do. So what I learned from the last outing was that for my panorama I need to capture more kind of area around the tree so that when the panorama has to get cropped down in Lightroom, that there's enough stuff to get kind of cropped out that's warped, so we don't crop out too much of the tree. So it was foggy up at the house, which is why I decided to run down here. But we're probably 100 feet, maybe 200 feet, sort of below the elevation of the house. And so all the fog is kind of up above us, and they're kind of in this little gully here with the creek running through it. So I can kind of see some of the fog up there in the background, but there's nothing really right here around the tree. And it looks like it might even be clearing right up above, which is not the best for my sky. So looks like this might be another day where this image isn't gonna quite turn out, but I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can capture more area around the tree, so that when it crops down it looks good. And I've also shifted my angle a bit from where I was before, and I think this will be a better angle overall in the tree. So we'll see if this one works, and then if it does, let me know. This is where we need to come back to for when we have foggy conditions. So I'm going to fire these off and see how we go. Well, looks like we do have a little bit of fog rolling in now. So I'm going to keep firing off shots, and hopefully this fog will kind of block out some of this background here eventually. That's kind of what I'm looking for. So yeah, hopefully this keeps increasing. Alright, well, this is trip number 4 or 5 down to the tree for this shot. So I'm hoping that we get a little bit of light here at sunset, golden hour, and we'll see if we can get anything better than this morning. So unfortunately, we don't really have any good clouds in the sky right behind the tree. They got some over there. You got some over there. And it looks like that over there might light up. Alright, well, it looks like we have maybe a cloud moving over. Filming on my iPhone now because we're running out of memory card space on the A7S III. So it's just chilling back there. If this cloud moves over and then we get a blast of light, that would be perfect. So, crossing my fingers for that. Clouds are moving really fast. But so far nothing that's looking good up there. And no light. Getting all the sunset light action back there. Need clouds here. Alright, I'm back again. I think this is day 5 or day 6. This tree, trying to get things going. Got some fog today, this morning. So, desired effect of kind of blocking up the background there. So hopefully all that sticks around. And then what I'm hoping for is at some point this will clear off right as the sun hits the clouds in a few minutes. So, gotta rush it. Well, I think that'll about do it. Got a little bit of fog, so I think that might help take out the busy background. So we'll see if we can make that work. But didn't really get any interesting light for the top of the tree. So yeah, we'll keep processing these images and see what's kind of the best version that we can make. There's a good possibility that just to have something a little more interesting, I might do a sky replace and kind of just see how that looks and play around with that feature since I've never really used it before in Photoshop. Normally that's not something I would do, but in this case, we'll call it a digital art instead of a photo. All right, so we'll jump into Lightroom here and show you a little bit of the process that I went through when trying to create the final version of the image. So originally I was attempting to do a multi-row panorama of the tree to try to capture enough area so that when I cropped the panorama for the final image that the entire tree was in there. So we started off with a lot of frames that looked something like this, and this is actually an HDR composite of 3 different exposures. So the HDR process obviously combines those 3 exposures into one to provide that high dynamic range. And so for each row of the panorama, I'd have a number of images like this going across the scene, and they would eventually get combined into a panorama image that looked something like this. And so my goal was initially to essentially take 3 rows to stack these panoramas vertically. So I think this ended up being a mid row here. This was one of the first sort of lower rows that I took. But the challenge that I kept running into was for the very top row. For the top row that ended up looking something like this, Adobe Lightroom and even Adobe Photoshop had a really hard time creating these panoramas and stacking them and stitching them together with the other rows. And so eventually, after I don't know how many hours, I kind of gave up on this process and decided to go with the single exposure. So hopefully I can revisit that kind of multi-row panorama idea in the future when I've further developed my Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop skills. But for now, what I decided to do was just kind of start editing one of the single frame exposures that I took, and this was actually on the first day of shooting. So this is the HDR composite of the single frame, so I also did a bracketed shot of this frame, so 3 exposures I believe it was, to kind of generate this image. And in reality, this is almost done here just with the HDR kind of effect. And so I made a few adjustments, nothing really major here on this part of the process, but like I said in the video, the one big thing that I did do was the sky replacement. So as you can see here in this image, this is the original sky. Not much action going on here, nothing really interesting, and really because it's so bright, it takes away from the actual subject of the image, which is the tree here. So did spend 5 days going back to the tree to try to get a better image that had a better sky in it, and the conditions just didn't cooperate with me. So I decided to go ahead and try out the Photoshop Sky Replace feature. Like I said before, it's not something that I would typically do, and not something that I've actually really ever used before, but I decided to give it a try on this image just because I had already spent so much time going back to the tree and wanted to come away with something that looked a little bit more interesting. So after using the Sky Replace function in Photoshop, this is what we ended up with. And yeah, I mean, to me, it does look pretty natural. These are the types of sunsets that can happen kind of in this area, or sunrises. And so I don't feel too bad about putting it in there, but obviously whenever I would do something this kind of drastic to an image, I do put the disclaimer on there because I typically try to like to keep my photography a little more representative of what I was actually seeing at the time that I took the photograph. But like I said, in this case, I wanted to do something a little more interesting just for the video and also to share on social media. So this was our final image. Uh, the ironic thing was I could have walked away with this one on day one, but like I said, I was trying to get that panorama to work out with something interesting in the sky. So in all, I spent about 5 days trying to figure something out for this image at this tree location. And a lot of time trying to stitch that panorama together, which in the end didn't work out. But anyway, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks so much for watching. Do subscribe and give the video a like.